Hello everybody, I am Dr. Chandrashekhar Patil, a practicing cardiologist from Kolhapur, and I will be discussing health, happiness and longevity. Traditionally, when we speak of longevity, we consider it to be determined by our genetics and destiny, and we consider it to be a fixed one. However, scientifically, it is not a fixed entity. Genetics as well as the destiny play a role, however, it is a minor one. And the major role is played by your choices of your lifestyles. So, it is the behavioral pattern of your lifestyle that will determine your longevity, and you can improve it by your changes or improvement in choices. And that is our point of discussion. So, we'll start our discussion with Charles Darwin's statement. He states that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change will lead to the survival. So, whatever is true for the species survival is same for the individual survival. In India, males on an average live for 69 years of age and females live for 72 years of age. The female outliving male is a global phenomena and it is related to three parts. The first thing is the female sex hormones, they impart immunity against cardiovascular diseases. Secondly, the extra copy of X chromosome imparts them immunity against the mutations in one X chromosome. And thirdly, the male sex hormones leads to aggressive behavior that reduces lifespan of males. Secondly, the distinction between lifespan and genetics. Lifespan contributes 75% to the longevity and it comes into play in first 80 years. Genetics play a minority role. It is the 25% of the total value and it comes into play after 80 years of age. Many of people come to us and tell us that they are having a heart attack at the age of 50 years. However, their parents are surviving more than 90 years of age and they are healthy. This is because the genetics, there are three sets of genes. Two genes are related to cholesterol metabolism and one gene related to chromosomal repair metabolism that will impart a survival advantage and that will come into play only after 80 years of age. So, till 80 years we have to have a good lifestyle so that we can reach 80 years of life. And the third thing is a distinction between lifespan and health span. So, lifespan is the number of years what we can count and health span is an independent life. So, there will be a marginal decade. There will be a dependence on your family members to have your daily activities of life. And in order to improve longevity, we have to improve our health span also by reducing our dependence on our family members. So, coming to death, there are 4 horseman killer diseases. The first one is a cardiovascular disease. So, this is the heart attack and paralysis. The second one is a cancer. The third one is uncontrolled diabetes and fourth one is Alzheimer's disease. It is a related to your memory. It is also called as a dementia. So, we'll start with the most dreaded disease, that is a heart attack. Why it occurs, when it occurs and how it occurs. Now, whenever heart attack occurs, it is the occlusion of coronary arteries. So, these coronary arteries are 3 coronary arteries, they supply the heart, and whenever there is a occlusion of the artery, it produces a blood supply that imparts a necrosis. It leads to a loss of muscle mass and that will lead to death. One of our teacher always used to question our students that what is the commonest presentation of heart attack. So, we students used to tell him that it is the chest pain. Some people used to tell that it is the breathlessness. Some people used to tell that it is a sweating. So, he always used to answer that sudden cardiac death is the commonest presentation of heart attack and that's why we have to fear heart attack. So, coming to the risk factors or the causes of these cardiovascular diseases, there are 3 kinds of risk factors. The first one is a modifiable, meaning that we can modify these risk factors and we can improve the chances that we will not get a heart attack. So, these according to the prevalence are blood pressure, then tobacco abuse, the third one is a diabetes, the fourth one is a cholesterol, fifth one is obesity and the last one is a physical inactivity. Even the physical inactivity is last on the list, it is the commonest thing which will lead to the increase in prevalence of the all risk factors. The second one is a non-modifiable group of risk factors. For example, increasing age and our genetics, where there is a history of premature coronary artery disease. For example, less than 55 years in male and less than 60 years in female. These are non-modifiable risk factors. And the third category is a non-measurable risk factors. We cannot measure a stress like a blood pressure or like sugar levels. However, it contributes to 25 to 35% of the people who will be having a heart attack. Now, why these risk factors lead to heart attack? Now, our vessels are composed of three layers, and the innermost layer is lined by a lining of cells called as the endothelium. So, whenever there is an increased blood pressure, these vessels are stretched and there is a damage to this endothelium, and that will lead to increase in the blockages. Similarly, nicotine will act as a toxin to this endothelial layer. Sugar will produce glycation of proteins, and cholesterol will directly deposit inside below these endothelial cells, leading to something known as atherosclerotic plaques, or it is called as a blockages in conventional terms. Obesity, physical inactivity, and psychosocial stress will lead to increase in oxidative stress, increase in inflammation, and all these factors contribute to increase in blockages. So once we have completed this list of risk factors leading to death, we have to consider that how we can improve all these things. So we'll start with exercise. Whenever we are talking about survival, there are four factors that will determine our survival. The first and the most important is a cardiovascular fitness or a cardiorespiratory fitness called as a CRF. In simple words, it is our stamina. It is measured in scientific parlance by VO2 max. It is considered as a maximum oxygen consumption. This is the most important aspect of our survival. The second thing is a lean muscle mass. We consider obesity in a negative sense. The more the fat person is having, the less is the survival. Similarly, the more the muscle mass the person is having, more the survival. The third thing is a resting heart rate. If somebody is sitting quietly for 5 minutes without taking nicotine or caffeine in last 1 hour, so that resting heart rate will determine person's survival. And the last thing is a surprise. It is the happiness of the person that will lead to his survival, and it is dependent on two factors according to science. First one is a relationship, and second one is a altruism behavior. Now considering the exercise, the longevity determinant is a cardiorespiratory fitness, and it is measured by cardiopulmonary exercise test. It is called as a CPET. And this test is slightly cumbersome because there will be a tight mask fitting on the face, and it will be having two sensors. One will be an oxygen sensor and the second will be a CO2 sensor. However, because it is significantly uncomfortable, it is not regularly done in our day-to-day practice, and instead of that, we can take treadmill, a regular exercise stress test which is done in a regular clinical practice, as a surrogate for determining the cardiorespiratory fitness. I will quote you the largest observational study in the literature, which was published in Journal of American College of Cardiology in the year 2022. The study was called as the ETHOS study, and it was an exercise treadmill health outcome study which included 750,000 people, and they were followed for more than 10 years. And there was a mortality of 23% at the end of study, because these people were relatively elder patients. They were ranging from 30 to 90 years of age, and they studied these people according to two subsets. The first one was comorbidities, meaning the cardiovascular risk factors what we have discussed, and they found two kinds of observations. For example, if somebody is having a blood pressure, they divided the people into two categories: people who are having a blood pressure and who are not having a blood pressure. And according to mortality, they divided into four subsets. So what they found is that if somebody is having a blood pressure, their chances of having a death will be increased by 14%. Diabetes was a stronger risk factor, and it led to 34% increase in the incidence of mortality. Smoking was the strongest among all risk factors, and it contributed to 40% increase in the chances of death. They studied a second group, like a fitness versus death rate. And what they found was that they divided people into 5 categories of fitness. The least 25%, 25 to 50%, 50 to 75%, then 75 to 97.5%, and the topmost category was from 97% to uppermost 100%. What they found was that the people who were the most fit, they were having a 400% less chances of death as compared to the least fit. So to conclude, the people who are having a hypertension, they had a 14% increase in the death rate, whereas the people who are the least fit, the most sedentary, they will be having 400% increase in the chances of death. So the exercise is the most determinant, or the fitness is the most determinant of your longevity. And suppose if you are the least fit person, most sedentary person, then is it a reason to worry about? No. I will quote another study. It was a cardiac study, and it was published in a JAMA Open Network study in 2011. In this study, there were very few people. There were 2000 people, but they were absolutely sedentary. And of these 2000 people, researchers divided them into two groups. Their average age was 45 years. The first half of the people, they were told that whatever you are doing is all right. We are just studying you. And in the second half, they encouraged these people to walk at least 7,000 steps per day. So one step is equivalent to 0.75 meter. So 7,000 steps counts to around 5 kilometers a day. And they found that at the end of 10 years, the people who were regularly walking 5 kilometers, their incidence of all-cause death was less than 70%. So if you are having a regular walk of 5 kilometers a day, you can reduce your mortality, all-cause mortality by 70%, and it is a significant number. So we have emphasized the importance of exercise. Now, what exercise dose and how much should be the intensity? So all guidelines say that you should be exercising at least 150 minutes per week. So it comes to around 30 minutes per day, at least 5 days in a week. And what is the intensity? So the intensity advised is a moderate intensity, and it should be in the zone 2 exercise intensity. So how these zones are created? The first thing you have to determine your maximum heart rate. So 220 minus age is your maximum heart rate. If you are 40 years of age, then your maximum heart rate will be 220 minus 40, and it will be 180. So whenever you are defining the zones of exercise, the zone 1 where you will be attaining 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. So it will be 90 to 110. The desirable zone is a zone 2 where you have to achieve between 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. So it will be around 110 to 125, and it should be your desirable range. And there will be upward grades of zones of exercise. In the maximum zone, that is the maximum zone 5, it will be 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate. So the heart rate should go up to 150 to 180. So why this is a division of all these exercises zones? Because whenever the heart rate is going above 70%, meaning you are entering a zone 3, then the lactate will accumulate in your body. So this lactate is a byproduct or an end product of a oxidative phosphorylation, and this will lead to soreness of your muscles, and it will limit your exercise tolerance. So once somebody is entering into zone 3, there will be soreness of the muscle, there will be burning of the muscle, there will be a fatigue sensation, and the person has to stop. Now, why all the guidelines are stating that you should be doing a moderate exercise? It is because of two reasons. The first reason is that there should not be any injury. You should be continuing the exercise and you will be getting the benefit of the exercise. And second, more important thing is that whenever the person is having some kind of a disease, for example, a heart disease, they will be having the chances that whenever they are entering into higher zones of exercise, they will be having arrhythmias, meaning problem in their heart rhythm, and that can increase the chances of death. And that's why all guidelines, they are advising that you should pertain to a moderate intensity of exercise. Now, how to determine that you are entering into a zone 2 of exercise? You should be able to talk in that zone 2 exercise, but you should not be interested in continuing the conversation beyond a single sentence. Now coming to a more fitter people, if you are fit, you are already doing this kind of exercise and you have to improve your VO2 max, then this is called as a high intensity exercise. Now if you want to increase your exercise intensity, there can be two modalities. One is called as a pyramidal training, where you are gradually increasing your zone of exercise, or secondly, there can be a polarized training. So scientifically, it has been proven that if you are doing a polarized training, meaning 80% of your exercise in zone 2 and 20% of your exercise in zone 4 or 5, like a sprint training or a high intensity intermittent training, then your chances of increasing your VO2 max will be significantly increasing. So zone 2 exercise, which is a foundation or where there will be improvement in your muscle capacity, there will be improvement in your VO2 max by 10 to 15%. If you are doing a high intensity exercise, then the ceiling will be increased, your heart will be significantly strengthened, and because of that, the similar increase in VO2 max will be there. But if you are combining it in 80-20 proportion, then your VO2 max will be significantly increased to more than 20%. And if you are having an exercise intensity problem, if you are talking in the context of somebody having a heart disease or arthritis problem or age, when their physical activity is limited, then there is to be a simple thing that it should be the exercise has to be graded with very slow increments, so that there is no overexertion and the benefits will be the same. At the same time, you are preventing any deterioration of your health. However, if you belong to this category, you have to consult your doctor. Now, coming to a more important thing, always we listen to all these kinds of news, a negative news, like somebody running a marathon and died suddenly, or some famous hero from movies, he had a death on a treadmill. So this is called as an exercise related sudden cardiac death. The incidence is approximately 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 100,000, and it is related to three kinds of things. First, all of these people will be male. In females, it is very uncommon to have a sudden cardiac death during exercise. Secondly, all these people will be above 35 years of age. So these are called as master athletes. And the third thing, their preparation is very limited, meaning that they start running at the age of 35 and they want to become a marathon runner at the age of 40 years. So you have to prevent these things, the sudden cardiac death, all the negative attributes of exercise, by doing simple tests. And if you are embarking on a journey of a high intensity exercise, you have to consult your physician and get some of the basic tests like a ECG, where you are excluding kind of channelopathies, echocardiography in order to rule out a structural heart disease, a stress test in order to know your physical fitness, and lastly, CT angiogram to rule out any anomalies of the coronary arteries. Now, coming to a second determinant of longevity, it is the lean muscle mass. The muscle mass decreases by 1% per year and strength decreases by 2% per year after the age of 40 years. It is because of the loss of type 2 fibers, and it is because of an anabolic resistance. It is related to a mTOR C1 pathway, and because of that, the muscle mass decreases. And the muscle mass is inversely related to your survival. So there are several studies of these kinds where there is a reduction in the muscle mass and the mortality will increase. So why this muscle mass improves your survival? This is because of three things. The first thing, muscle will act like a sponge for glucose, and because of that, the glucose disposal will be improved. The people will be significantly insulin sensitive, and it will lead to a survival advantage. The second thing will be that muscle will be a source of amino acids, and whenever that person is having a very severe disease, the amino acid reserve will improve their immunity and chances of survival. And third thing is that the muscle will act as a source of endocrine organ, and it will lead to a secretion of several products called as a myokines, and they are anti-inflammatory. There are several examples of that, and it will improve your survival. So when 30 years back, when I was a medical student, at that time all guidelines used to say that the resistance kind of exercise or isometric exercise is not allowed for heart disease patients, and for general population it is of a limited value. However, the recent guidelines recommend that you have to have at least 2 resistance training sessions per week in order to improve your muscle mass. The same thing applies to heart disease patients. Doing all these things, you have to prevent injuries. There should not be any overexertion. It has to be a graded exercise with slow increment. So is it compulsory to go to gym in order to have a resistant kind of exercise? No. You can do some kind of exercises like Surya Namaskar also for improving your muscle mass. Now the third kind of exercise is a stability exercise. Suppose if somebody gets a hip fracture, which is common after 65 years of age, the 1 year mortality in these people is more than 25%. So it is a significantly detrimental thing. And in order to prevent all these things, you have to have a stability exercises. And for example, it can be a yoga where you can have a stability. Secondly, you can have a functional training in gyms. So you will be asking me, you are telling that you have to do a aerobic exercise, you have to do a resistance exercise, you have to do a stability exercise. Now, how to find a time in your busy schedule? Like the desired amount is quite less. For aerobic exercise, it is approximately 2.5 hours per week. For weight training, it has to be 2 sessions of approximately 30 minutes. And for yoga, it should be 2 sessions per week. So you have to at least take out time of 1 hour per day in order to become healthy. When we talk about non-exercise movements, we talk about the burning of calories. Suppose we are consuming approximately 2000 to 3000 calories per day. Approximately 60% of that calories are burned for our basal metabolic needs. For example, our digestion, heart producing its heartbeat and blood pressure. Sleeping also requires some amount of calories. So 60% or the majority of the calories are required for our basal metabolic rate. Remaining 15% we can burn in our exercise. Whatever intense exercise we'll be doing, it cannot burn more than 20% of calories. So voluntarily, approximately 25% of the calories are consumed in something called as a non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT or NEAT. So this NEAT is studied in different studies. There are 3 groups of studies. In first group, the exercise is just like a regular exercise, 60 minutes of a daily exercise in a regular continuum. So in that group of exercise, researchers found that the blood pressure was reduced by approximately 10%. However, there was no change in sugars. Now this is related to an important thing that is called as a GLUT4 exercise. So whenever we start moving, there is something called as a GLUT4 receptor. GLUT is a glucose transporter. It is a GLU and T. And this 4 is specifically related to muscle. So muscle act like a glucose disposal system. And whenever we are moving, these receptors, they are hidden inside the cells in a vesicle. They become translocated, meaning they come outside the cell and they attach to the glucose. So this is only possible with movement. So the second group of exercise was a postprandial walk. The researchers asked the people to do an exercise in 20 minutes allocates, and they were done either preprandially or postprandially, before or after meals. And at the end of these exercises, researchers found that there was a reduction in sugar by approximately 10%. And in third group of exercise, the subjects were asked to do exercise in a small chunks, like 2 to 5 minutes of a walk every 30 to 60 minutes, coming in a total of 60 minutes per day, but divided into several subsessions. And researchers found that there was a significant reduction in both glucose as well as the insulin levels by approximately 30%. So it is not only the amount of calories you are burning, however, the important thing is how you are dividing your exercise throughout the day. The last thing is regarding the soleus push-ups. If you are a absolutely sedentary worker sitting all throughout the day, then you can just do a soleus push-ups, meaning that you have to push on your forefoot and lift your ankle and lift your knees. So if you are continuously doing it, there is a muscle called as a soleus, which is a sliver-like muscle on the back of your calf. It constitutes approximately 1% of muscle mass. However, it contains a fatigue resistant muscle fibers, and because of that you will be able to continue it for a long time, and it burns approximately 100 calories per hour. So this is very important. The second important determinant in longevity science is a nutritional biochemistry. So whenever we talk about a nutritional biochemistry, there are two things. Humans consume approximately 70 metric tons of food in their lifetime, and our body is what we eat. And secondly, on Amazon, there are more than 50,000 books which are related to diet and nutrition. This is because science knows in exact amplitude the details of the nutrients in a smaller proportion. For example, there are 1,40,000 small molecules of food where the molecular weight of that molecule is between 50 daltons to 1500 daltons, and we know exactly only about 188 small molecules regarding their chemical structure, their receptors and its interaction. So we have to discuss two things. One thing is a insulin resistance and second thing is a glycemic load. So as far as the insulin resistance is concerned, it is a new villain, and it is because of an increase in consumption of our ultra processed food and sugars. If you see the two scenarios from 1970 and 2025, we see that there is a significant spikes of insulin. It is because of increased frequency of our food intake. It is related to abundance of food, and because of the area under the curve of the insulin that is significantly increased, and it leads to increase in cardiometabolic diseases. The second thing is a biochronotype, meaning if somebody is consuming food in the morning versus that in the evening, there will be a lesser peak in the morning, whereas it will be a bigger peak in the evening. It is related to the endocrinal milieu. It is predominantly related to the hormones. Because of that, the dinner, if it is a significant proportion, it will lead to increased spike of insulin. And that's why the saying, eat your breakfast like a king, eat your midday meal like a common person or an average person, and eat your dinner like a beggar. So that it will have in accordance with the biochronotype, and there will be lesser peaks of the insulin in the evening. And the third thing is related to fasting. If there is one thing which is common all across religions, it is the fasting. And why this is so? Scientifically, whenever somebody is fasting, there will be three survival circuits that will be activated. The first one is a mTOR pathway, C2 pathway. The second one is a cyclic AMP kinase pathway, and the third pathway is a sirtuin pathway. It is related to experimental studies. In experimental animals, if somebody is given a ad libitum food, meaning the amount of the food is not limited, then that experimental animal's life will be shortened. Whereas if some experimental animal is consuming excess calories, then their life will be curtailed. Now, is it true for humans? We don't know, because there are no such kind of studies. However, we know for sure that if the calories are restricted, then the modern life predicaments like obesity and diabetes will be prevented. Now, coming to a second aspect, that is a glycemic load. Glycemic load is the amount of the sugar excursions because of the food. It will lead to two things. The first thing is a carbohydrate content of that food, and second is the quality of the food. And if you see in this graph, there is a red line in between. So whatever is on the right side, these are the natural whole foods, and whatever is on the left side, these are the processed food. And there are two blue lines, and it indicates the severity of the glycemic load. If the glycemic load is less than 10, it is the most desirable. Between 10 to 20, it is a moderately desirable, and if the glycemic load is above 20, it is the least desirable. Now, if we take a simple example, if we are consuming apple, then the glycemic load of that apple will be 5. If you are consuming a bread, now if somebody is a diabetic, we tell them that bread is not a harmful substance, and if you are consuming a bread, the glycemic load of that bread is 35, meaning the sugar excursion will be 7 times more as compared to that of apple. And if we consider cornflakes, which is considered as a healthy breakfast food, then it increases the sugar levels by again 2 times more. So the cornflakes glycemic load is 75, and it is more than that of a sugar. For sugar, a direct sugar, the glycemic load is 70. Now, coming to good nutrition, this is a slide from Blue Zones of Longevity, and it states that if you are consuming greens, beans, meaning legumes, and nuts along with whole grains, then this is the healthiest of food. And what is a bad nutrition? So we always blame it is a fast food. I always had a doubt, like what is a fast food? Like what Western food, what we consider as a bad food or a fast food is a burger. And when we consider our Indian food like vada pav or samosa or jalebi, what is the commonality in all these foods? Then there are three things. The first thing, the fiber is removed from the fast food so that the shelf life will be increased. Fiber is considered as a waste kind of a thing. However, it is the most nutritious aspect of the food. The second thing is that the sugar is added. May not be a direct sugar, it can be HFCS, it can be a high fructose corn syrup. It also increases the longevity or the shelf life of the food. And the third thing is that the trans fats are added. For example, anything which is a fried food. Suppose if you are eating a samosa from halwai, it will be multiple times the same oil will be used and the trans fats will be generated, and these things are detrimental for the health. Coming to healthy food, we have to consider proteins as the first because these are the building blocks of our body. We have to consume at least 1.2 to 1.5 grams of proteins per day. The only exception is patients who are having a kidney diseases, then they have to consult your doctor. The protein can be from vegetable source, non-vegetable source, and it depends on your spiritual or religious beliefs. There is no science behind it. The GI absorption, there is a significant limit for that, and if you are able to divide your protein intake into 4 parts, then it will be beneficial because the absorption will be more. If you are a non-vegetarian, you have to consume fish at least 2 to 3 times a week, and you have to avoid a red meat. You have to instead supplement it with a white meat. And eggs is considered as a complete protein. It is because all the essential amino acids are present. However, if we compare egg with other sources, vegetarian sources of food, then egg contains approximately 13 grams of protein per 100 grams of egg. Whereas in vegetarian food, for example, pumpkin seed, they will be having 30 grams of protein per 100 gram. Peanuts will be having 25 grams per 100 grams of peanuts, and kidney beans, chickpeas and cottage cheese, they will be having approximately 20 grams per 100 gram. So there is not much differentiation between vegetable source and protein source. The only thing you have to consider is the vegetable proteins, they are associated with fibers and their absorption will be less. And secondly, they will not be complete because there will be some amino acids amongst the 9 essential amino acids that will be lacking, and you have to have a complementary choices of vegetable foods. For example, rice will be deficient in lysine, whereas beans or legumes will be deficient in methionine. So you have to combine rice and beans so that the proteins will be complete. The same thing applies for a combination of chapati and dal. The last thing regarding proteins is a leucine threshold. Leucine is one of the essential amino acids, and there has to be a certain amount of leucine in food. For example, for a younger people, it should be 2 grams, and for older population, it should be 3 grams, and that amount of leucine is called as a leucine threshold, and that threshold, if it is met, then it will lead to protein synthesis. So whey protein isolate is a significant source of a leucine, and if you are taking, for example, eggs, then one egg will having at least approximately 0.5 grams of protein per egg. So you have to consume at least 5 to 6 eggs in order to achieve your leucine threshold. However, one scoop of whey protein isolate will be having 2.5 grams. So whey isolate proteins will be beneficial. Only thing you have to be aware of adulteration. Now, second important aspect is fibers. It is considered as the cheapest anti-obesity drugs. Now, in body, there is a body's own pharmacy. The colonic bacteria which are present in large intestine, their weight is approximately 200 grams, and they produce lot of essential or beneficial products that will help to maintain your weight. It will improve your immunity and it will improve your mood. Now, there is something called as a probiotic, meaning gut microbiomes, they are the colonic bacteria, the beneficial bacteria are called as a probiotic. They will require a raw product that is called as a fiber, and it is called as a prebiotic. The thylakoids from spinach is considered as a good source. Polyphenols from all colorful fruits and vegetables is a good source. And these beneficial bacteria will produce a final product that is called as a postbiotic. So these are called as a short chain fatty acids. There are 3 kinds. The first one is acetate. The second one is a butyrate, and the third one is a propionic acid. And all these things, they will be having a significant proportion of satiety hormone release, and that will lead to your satiety and it will control your weight. The amount of fiber you should eat should be approximately 50 grams. The recommendation is between 25 to 30 grams per day, but the ideal one is a 50 gram. And for that, you have to have 5 servings of vegetables and fruits per day. Now, the next thing I'll be talking will be a polyphenols. If you are seeing some kinds of videos or some kinds of podcast, it will always explain regarding some kind of a superfood. And if I have to scientifically explain you a single superfood, then that will be polyphenols. They will be present in colorful fruits and vegetables. Now, I will quote one of the study, which is a famous study. It is a Predimed study. It was a Spanish study, wherein 7,500 people were studied for 5 years to see the importance of Mediterranean diet and the survival. And what this diet consists of? It consists of fruits, 3 servings per day, vegetables, at least 2 servings per day, nuts. It has to be a 30 grams, meaning a handful of nuts like walnut and almond per day. And there were 3 like things which were peanut, 3 servings per week, legumes, 3 servings per week, and fish. If you are non-vegetarian, then fish should be 3 servings per week. And if you are eating meat, then it should be a white meat instead of a red meat. And what this study found was that there was a 30% reduction in death, heart attack, and paralysis at the end of 5 years. So this is a very significant mortality reducing diet, and you have to follow this. Now, coming to cooking oil, whenever we utter a word fat, we are having a negative connotations. However, this is not true. Any oil will contain 2 bad things. That will be a saturated fat and omega-6 fatty acids. However, the oil also will contain 2 good things. That is a monounsaturated fat or MUFA and omega-3 fatty acids. So, what guidelines state is that there should not be any solid food fats in your cooking oil. For example, you should not use coconut oil, you should not use palm oil, or you should not use butter. And this should be the desirable oils should be a liquid seed oil. However, when we think from the metabolic perspective, there are 4 things that we should consider whenever we are considering oil. First thing, the amount of saturated fat, which is a bad fat. The amount of monounsaturated fat, which is a good fat. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, that is a bad versus good ratio, and a smoke point. So, from a Maharashtrian's point of view, the 4 kinds of oils are available. Amongst them, the groundnut oil is considered as a better amongst the all 4 choices. And there are 3 varieties of preparation of oil. The first one is a cold pressed oil, meaning that the seeds are just pressed and the temperature maintained is less than 45 degrees centigrade. The second one is a filtered oil. It is a cold press oil, but by means of a cloth, the impurities are filtered. And the third variety is a refined oil. These are the industrial refined seed oils, wherein the oil is boiled to a temperature of approximately 160 degrees. Chemicals like hexane is added, so in order to remove the impurities and impart anti-odorant characteristics. Amongst them, the filtered oil is considered as the best oil. If we go to North and East India, the mustard seed oil is a better oil. And if you go to South, the coconut oil is commonly used. However, you have to use a cold pressed coconut oil. Now, coming to fats, we have discussed that not all fats are bad fats. The only exception is a trans fat. You have to consume, as we have discussed, unsalted nuts. And here there is an importance of soaking. For example, if you are eating almonds, they are overnight soaked in a water so that we can remove the peel of the almonds, and it contains tannins and fibrates, and this will improve the digestibility. The chewing is important thing for all foods including nuts, because the chewing will impart a anti-obesity characteristics. For example, there are lot of studies in Japan. In Indian tradition as well as Japanese tradition, it is considered as chewing a food more than 30 times is considered as a very health beneficial. And in Japan, the cohort study states that if somebody chewing food for more than 30 times per morsel, then it will lead to improvement in your weight as well as the metabolic parameters like diabetes. Now, coming to a stigmatized food, we always consider ghee as a detrimental food. However, we have to understand that 35% of it contains a monounsaturated fat, and butyrate is one of the product that ghee contains. It is considered as a beneficial. The same thing applies for butter. We have to take into consideration the amount of saturated fat we are consuming. The last stigmatized food is a egg yolk. Previously, it was considered as a very bad for cholesterol. However, recent guidelines state that for a healthy person, one egg yolk per day is not harmful, and for people with heart diseases or somebody is having a cholesterol in a higher range, they can have a 50% of intake of egg yolk. And lastly, regarding salt, we have to curtail our salt intake with all food to less than 5 grams per day. It comes to around a single teaspoon. We are describing carbohydrates third amongst the macronutrients. It constitutes at least 50% of our total calorie intake, or it is considered as a staple food. According to science, there are 4 different NOVA grades of food. The first one is a unprocessed food. The second one is a partially processed. The third one is a processed food, and the last one is a unprocessed food. And according to NOVA grade 1, 2, 3 and 4 considered. Now if we take an example of apple, then a natural whole apple will be a NOVA grade 1. In NOVA grade 2, there will be a peeled apple. It is a partially processed. In NOVA grade 3, it will be the juice of apple. We have removed the fibers. And NOVA grade 4, it will be the apple juice which has been bought from a market where the industrial additives will be there. Similarly, if we consider any cereal, then there will be 3 coatings. The seed itself is called as a germ. There will be outer coating where there will be a bran, and in between there will be an endosperm, that will be a starch which will be needed for the growth of the germ. So if we take an example of wheat, then whatever is a whole wheat is a NOVA grade 1. So if you are ordering a whole wheat roti, it will be a NOVA grade 1 food. If we are making a rava or suji out of that, we are making a rava idli or we are making a upma, then it will be a NOVA grade 2 food. If you are making a maida out of that and we are ordering a naan or kulcha, then it will be a NOVA grade 3 food. And whereas if you are purchasing cookies or confectionaries from market, then it will be a NOVA grade 4 food, because there will be additive sugars, there will be additive ingredients, industrial ingredients into the food. Now whatever NOVA grade is the best food and whatever NOVA grade 4 food is the worst food. Now whenever we are talking about a carbohydrate and mitochondrial health, then the ideal food should be having a steady glucose supply. There has to be antioxidants, and thirdly there has to be balanced proteins as well as the fibers to be for having a good carbohydrate substrate. Now coming to staple food, in Maharashtra we use millets as well as the cereal, and the commonest food which we consume is wheat chapatis and polished rice. However, the alternatives like millets, for example jawar or bajra or ragi or wari, they are considered as a better choice as far as the mitochondrial health is considered. Coming to rice, the brown rice and basmati rice are the better choices of rice. And coming to a glycemic load, if we are following some of the strategies, for example, if we are making a dough and keeping it outside for an hour or so and keeping it in a freeze overnight, then it will produce some fermentation and that will reduce the glycemic load. Secondly, if you are making a rice and if you are cooling it and again rewarming it, it will make the starch more resistant for digestion and the glycemic load will be reduced. And third thing is that if you are squeezing a lime inside the rice, then it will produce the acidic pH and it will reduce the glycemic load. So these are small maneuvers which we can do. They will not be extremely beneficial. However, they will lowering the glycemic load by some percentages. Now coming to fruit, we consider fruits, all fruits are equivalent. However, there are 2 kinds of food. One are fibrous fruits and the second variety is a sugary fruits. In Indian scenario, mangoes, pineapples and grapes are not considered as a healthy fruits. Similarly, the custard apple, dates and figs, they are not good for mitochondrial health. All remaining fruits are good fruits. Now coming to sugar, whenever we talk about any nutrition, we have to curtail some things. For example, we have to curtail trans fat absolutely. We have to curtail processed food, and the most important thing is a sugar. Sugar is considered as a toxin bundled by God along with the antidote, which is a fiber. The sugar can be either a sucrose or it can be some kind of a sugar like a high fructose corn syrup, or it is also called as a HFCS, which is additives in many of the foods. We have to limit our sugar intake to less than 10% of our calories. The recent guideline states that less than 6% of the calories, and it comes to around 4 to 5 teaspoons of sugar per day, the ideal quantity. The recommendations from guidelines, it is 6 to 9 teaspoons per day. There is something called as an longevity tax. It is a computerized model so that eating excess sugar will curtail our lifespan by more than 8 years in a normal person. For an obese person, the longevity tax will be 15 years, and a person with a metabolic syndrome who is having a blood pressure, diabetes, then their lifespan will be curtailed by 20 years. Whenever we talk about obesity, we are cacti in rainforest. Evolutionary, humans evolved in an energy depleted environment. Now there is an abundance of food, and because of that, the obesity is having an epidemic. Now, obesity can be calculated by different parameters. The commonest used is a body mass index. However, the central obesity or the abdominal obesity is considered as a more important, and the strongest parameter is a waist height ratio, meaning that your waist circumference should be less than 50% of your height and the ratio should be less than 0.5. If the ratio increases more than 0.6, then you will be developing all the cardiometabolic diseases. Now, there are three kinds of fats. The first one is a subcutaneous or a big butt fat. It is considered as a healthy fat, even though it is aesthetically looking not nice. Its amount up to 10 kg is a tolerable. There is second thing which is called as a visceral fat or a big belly fat. Its amount up to 2.5 kg is permissible. And the last and the worst thing is a hepatic fat. Any amount more than 250 grams is a bad fat. Now, why this is so? Because if these levels are exceeded, there is something called as a pro-inflammatory cytokines released from the fat. Now, previously obesity or the fat tissue or the adipose tissue was considered as an inert excess metabolites or the excess fatty acids which are stored in the body. However, the recent concept is that the adipose tissue or the fat tissue acts like an endocrine organ, and it secretes lot of things like 600 molecules are secreted and they act as a pro-inflammatory cytokines. The adiponectin, which is a healthy one, however, lot of remaining things are unhealthy ones like leptin, angiotensin, aldosterone, neprilysin. They are as a group called as a LAN, and they are very detrimental for our health. Now, there are two studies of obesity. The first study is obesity and sugar. It was a Danish study. It was a small amount of study. There were 100 people divided into groups of 25 into 4 categories. The first group was given 1 liter of Coke per day in addition to their regular diet. And at the end of 1 year, researchers found that they had a weight gain of 10 kg. So this was expected. Additional sugar, additional calories, weight gain. In the second group, the people were given 1 liter of diet Coke in addition to their regular diet, and they found that there was a 2 kg weight gain. So even though they are calorie neutral, they constitute sugar replacements and which are insulin sensitizers, and they will lead to increase in your weight. The third group was given 1 liter of milk. There was no change in the weight. And the fourth group was given additional 1 liter of water. There was 2 kg in weight loss. Now, there is one recent theory of obesity which considers mild dehydration as a risk factor for obesity, because in our hypothalamus there are two centers. One is a thirst center and one is a hunger center, and which are very adjacent to each other. So if somebody is having a mild dehydration, the body considers this as a lack of calories and people consume more calories. So if you are obese, you have to consume more amount of water. The second study I wanted to quote is a smaller study than the first study. There were only 24 people and they were divided into two equal groups. One group was given ultra processed diet, meaning there was nothing natural in that diet like burgers or sandwiches. And the second group was given absolutely unprocessed food. Everything was natural or a Nova grade 1 food. And what they found at the end of 2 weeks, the people who were consuming unprocessed diet, they had a weight gain of 1 kg. That was considered natural. However, if we see at their calorie expenditure, there were 500 excess calories in ultra processed diet, because there is concept called as a hedonic origin of our hunger. Because we are seeing a ultra processed food which is a super palatable food, we consume more food. However, the surprise was it in the composition of the calories. If we consider the calories, then there were 250 calories which were consumed from the carbohydrate group, 250 excess calories were consumed from the fat group. However, the protein calories were the same in both groups. So there is one more theory of obesity which states that humans are amino acid foraging animals, meaning that we are looking only for protein. So once our protein needs are met, we are having a satiety. So in ultra processed food, there are always a lack of proteins. It always constitutes 5 to 10% of calories from proteins. Whereas in unprocessed food, the protein content will be approximately 15 to 20% of your total food. So we have to consume more proteins in order to prevent our obesity. Now coming to a metabolically healthy obese subgroup, approximately 20% of the obese individuals, they will be MHOs, meaning they will be metabolically healthy obese. Their visceral fat, if the MRI has been done, if you see in this picture, the left sided MRI is from a person with a MHO and the right sided MRI is from a metabolically unhealthy person. The amount of visceral fat, meaning the fat which is stored on the linings of the viscera or in the abdomen, is significantly more in unhealthy people, and the difference in these two categories is related to the amount of exercise. So if you are obese, then at least you exercise so that the visceral fat quantity will be less. Now this is what happens in our day-to-day practice. We tell people that your weight is excess, it is unhealthy, your lifespan will be reduced, so you have to reduce your weight. So suppose if somebody is having a 100 kg of weight and the desirable weight is 70 kg, we ask them at least you reduce 10% of your weight, at least 10 kgs, so that you will be having a mortality risk reduction of approximately 20%. So all these people, they religiously follow diet, religiously follow exercise, and they reduce their weight according to their willpower. They can go down up to 10-20 kgs of weight. However, what we see in our day-to-day practice is that at the end of 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 6 months, their weight will be progressively coming to their baseline. And at the end of 3 to 5 years, they will be coming to baseline. And people consider it is the fault of these people. They don't follow the diet, don't follow the exercise. However, these people are extremely sincere. They follow everything. However, there is a phenomena called as a leptin resistance, meaning the body considers lack of food as a something like a drought or famine, and body conserves energy by reducing the basal metabolic rate. So if you are obese, your weight is significantly more, then at least you can follow two strategies. You can reduce your weight consistently for at least 2 to 3 kg in long time weight reduction, so that you will be reducing your visceral fat. And secondly, you exercise regularly, so that even if you are a obese person, you will become metabolically healthy obese. Third important aspect of longevity is sleep. So whenever we talk about health, we always stress the importance of diet and exercise. However, we give less importance to sleep. Sleep also is considered as equally important as compared to diet and exercise. Now there is a social epidemic of sleep deprivation. People used to sleep at least for 8 hours 100 or 200 years ago. However, with the advent of artificial light, our sleep duration has decreased to 6 hours, and there is a contribution of our modern lifestyle also. Now what this sleep deprivation makes is a sympathetic nervous system activation and release of more cortisol. Both are detrimental, and they increase the chances of heart attack and paralysis, and they increase the control of diabetes, blood pressure, and they lead to increase in the incidence of obesity because of the imbalance in the hormones which is producing satiety and the hunger, as well as the reduction in the immunity. So when we talk about the sleep, it consists of a base parts of 90-minute cycles, and there are 4 stages of sleep. The deepening of stages of non-rapid eye movement sleep, and the most important is a rapid eye movement sleep. So whenever we go to sleep, we start with a non-REM sleep, and then lastly the REM sleep will occur, and whole cycle will be repeated again and again. So the initial half of the sleep will contains NREM sleep predominantly, and the latter half of the sleep there will be REM sleep, which will be a predominant. Now there are few things. The first thing, sleep is related to memory and learning. So there are two kinds of memories. One is a short-term memory, and this memory is stored inside a area called as a hippocampus. It is part in the medial temporal lobe, and this hippocampus, it transfers this memory into a long-term hard drive that is called as a prefrontal cortex. And this phenomena will occur only during a sleep, which is a deep NREM sleep and the REM sleep. Now there were experiments done in USA where the school times were started 1 hour later. For example, if the school is starting at 7:30, it was delayed up to 8:30. And what the researchers found that because of this delay in school timing, there was an increase in the sleep timing. And whenever we are saying that there is a 2 hours deficit of sleep, the total duration will be from 8 hours to 6 hours will be at 25%. However, the REM sleep reduction will be a 75% because the REM belongs to latter part of the sleep. And what these researchers found was that when the school time was delayed by 1 hour, the scholastic aptitude test, the SAT scores in the USA, they were increased by approximately 200 points. So it is a significantly beneficial thing of a sleep essential for learning. The second thing is related to memory. So the accumulation of beta amyloid and tau proteins inside the brain is responsible for our loss of memory or diseases called as a dementia. And there is a system called as a glymphatic system. It is a glial lymphatic system which happens only during the deep NAREM sleep, and that leads to the prevention or the removal of these waste products from the brain, and so that our memory is kept sharp. So there are a lot of things which can be discussed, like for example, there are two famous politicians. One was Ronald Reagan and another was Margaret Thatcher. Both were boasting regarding their less sleep, which is not harmful. Like they were sleeping for 4 hours and they had a significant working time. They were very successful people. However, both of them got a significant dementia in early 70s. So having an adequate sleep is very essential for prevention of dementia. Whenever we talk regarding accidents, we consider alcohol is a predominant cause. However, sleep is equally contributing. Microsleep is a significant entity which will occur because of a sleep deprivation. Microsleep is an entity which will be a very micro amount of sleep. It will be 1 to 10 seconds of a sleep, but it will be involuntary. And if there are two prerequisites for microsleep, first thing is that the previous night's sleep or a previous 2 nights sleep is less than 6 hours. And you should be awake for more than 16 hours. Suppose if you are having deprivation of sleep for last few days, and if you are awake for more than 16 hours, and if you are driving, so you will be having involuntary microsleeps, and if it occurs on turns or at a fast speed, it can lead to accident. So you have to have a good sleep for prevention of all these accidental problems. Now coming to sleep hygiene, this is the most important thing which one can have in order to have a good sleep. The first thing is a sleep opportunity time, meaning that you have to allocate at least 7 to 8 hours for having a sleep. Second thing, the darkness is a paramount. Edison invented light bulb approximately 150 years back. However, it disrupted our sleep significantly. So you have to have a dark sleeping room in order to have a good quality of sleep. The third important thing is the temperature. Our core body temperature reduces by 1 to 1.5 degrees during the initiation of the sleep, and that's why we have to have a cool room temperature during the sleep. The fourth important thing is the avoidance of blue light. All the mobile screens, TV screens or the computer screens will be having a technology called as a blue LED. Now, whenever humans evolved from non-human primates or from the aquatic mammals, so the light which was coming to ocean was filtered through the water, and only the blue component of the light was reaching the bottom of the ocean. So because of that, the fish brains, are having a very much sensitivity. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, which determines the release of melatonin, is very sensitive to blue LED. The same thing applies to humans also. Evolutionary, the same circuits are there, and because of that, humans are very sensitive for blue LED. And whenever the light is coming from the screens, the blue LED light, it inhibits the production of melatonin, which is essential for the initiation of the sleep. So we have to avoid all these screens at least 3 hours before the sleep. And the last important thing is the avoidance of food alcohol and caffeine prior to sleep. We have to avoid food and alcohol at least 3 hours before sleep, and caffeine for at least 6 to 8 hours. There will be some individual sensitivity, like some people will be more sensitive as compared to other people. However, caffeine is an important antagonist of adenosine. Now, this adenosine is a byproduct of brain metabolism of ATPs, which is a energy currency of the brain. And the more the time we are awake, the more the adenosine will be produced in our brain. And this adenosine is an indicator of our sleepiness. Now, once we are taking a caffeine, we are blocking the adenosine receptors and we are disrupting the sleep. So that's why we have to have caffeine at least 6 to 8 hours before our sleep. Whenever we consider stress as a very bad one. However, there are two kinds of stress. One is a eustress, which is essential for life. So the stresses which are acute and life-threatening, for example, for animals, some predator is behind them, it will be a eustress. The sympathetic system or our blood pressure will be increased, your heart rate will be increased, our respiration will be increased, the glucose will be mobilized in order to running from the predator. So this is called as a eustress. However, there is a difference between animals and humans. So once the stress is over, the animals start grazing the next minute and they forget about all the stress. However, for humans, a smaller stress like somebody caught in a traffic jam will lead to a lingering stress for a significant amount of time, and this lingering of the stress will lead to oxidative stress. It will lead to significant increase in inflammation, and that will lead to increase in the incidences of disease. So what is the remedy for this stress? The first and the foremost is the stress of fear of death. So in order to combat this fear of death, there is no scientific thing that we can do. We have to go to spirituality or religious things. In Gita, the philosophy is that the soul is immortal. Whatever we are changing is our body. So that philosophy is very important for elevation of our fear about death. The second thing is we have to stay away from the negative things, and the negative things are predominantly seen by our media. They will be talking only about the negative news because they have to increase their viewership, and negative news or the negative phenomena in the world are evolutionary based considered as a very important thing, and that's why our minds are focused on all these negative things. However, this will lead to significant stress. And the most important thing which we can volitionally do is a meditation in order to prevent our stress. Now, whenever we are awake, our brain will be firing at a very high speed. This is between 15 to 30 waves per second, and these are called as a beta waves. Whenever we are sleeping, there will be delta waves. They will be very slow waves and they will be less than 5 waves per second. However, meditation is a thing which is in between, where there will be theta waves. The waves will be between 4 to 8 and they will be inducing lot of generative changes which will be very beneficial for combating stress and for in general to improve our health. So they will be doing two things. On a volitional nervous system, meditation will activate 3 centers in the brain. One is a dorsolateral part of the prefrontal cortex, second one is a insular cortex, and third one is a ACC. And activation of these 3 centers will lead to improvement in your focus, improvement in your motivation, the mood will be improved and the memory will be improved. And there will be one more important thing that will be happening, will be a inhibition or a reduction in the intensity of the fear center called as the amygdala. So this amygdala is a seahorse kind of a thing which is present in the mesencephalic part of the brain, and it is called as a fear center, and that will lead to our anxiety, our worries and our negative emotions. So this center will undergo a atrophy, and this will lead to an improvement in our mood status. Now the second thing meditation will be doing will be its impact on the autonomic nervous system or involuntary nervous system. So there are 2 kinds of involuntary things. The first one is a sympathetic nervous system, and the overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system will increase our blood pressure, will increase our heart rate, will increase our respiration. Whereas there is something called as a break, which is called as a parasympathetic nervous system. It will reduce all the physiological things. So what meditation does is that it will apply more brake. It will make the parasympathetic tone more, and because of that our heart rate, blood pressure and respiration will be in a lower side, and that will be beneficial to our health. This hypothalamus, it contains both the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic centers, and this will control all these things. Now coming to two additional benefits of meditation, the meditation will slow aging. So at the age of 50 years, the person who is regularly meditating, the brain will be 7 years younger. And because of meditation, there will be a bliss hormone. It is called as a anandamide. It is a endocannabinoid hormone, and that will be secreted. Now it is a generalized concept that it is considered as a some kind of a esoteric thing. It is been practiced by some special kind of people, and it requires a significant amount of time. It is not a true thing as far as the health is concerned. Only thing, you have to sit quietly, maybe 12 minutes in a day, to have a beneficial impact of meditation on your health. You can do pranayam if you are not liking the meditation. Now there are several studies in the literature which stress the importance of meditation. Now the common theme in the Indian culture is that the dog, which breathes approximately 50 to 60 times in a minute, it lives for approximately 10 to 15 years. Whereas tortoise, which breathes approximately one breath per minute, it lives approximately 100 plus years. So this increase in longevity related to reduction in the breathing in Indian tradition is called as amount of breath that is given at the time of birth. However, from scientific perspective, it is related to sympathetic activity. There is one famous study which was published in NEGM 2005, and it was a importance of a resting heart rate related to mortality. It was a Paris prospective project study. It was a PPP study whereby 5,000 plus people in the Paris municipal area were subjected to this study, and the study was continued for more than 23 years. And what the researchers found, that all the basic parameters like somebody's blood pressure, somebody's diabetes, somebody's heart disease was related to mortality. However, the strongest determinant of a long-term mortality was a resting heart rate. If somebody's resting heart rate was less than 60, that person's amount of life was more. Whereas if somebody's basal heart rate was more than 75, then their longevity was limited. So if somebody is having a basal heart rate more than 75, is it a worrisome thing? No, it's a modifiable thing. You can do two things. The first thing is exercise. During exercise itself, there will be increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure. However, for the remaining part of the day, your resting heart rate will be reduced. It is because the parasympathetic tone is increased because of exercise. And secondly, whenever you are doing a meditation, the parasympathetic tone will be increased. So if you are having a higher basal rate, you can do two lifestyle modifications so that your basal heart rate will be reduced and your longevity will be improved. Last part of our discussion is happiness and longevity. Even though happiness is an abstract thing and which we cannot measure by numbers, there are a lot of studies. This study is from 2019 from the Journal of Positive Psychology, and which states that the 50% of our happiness is related to our genetics. It is called as a set point of happiness. However, whatever we can do about happiness is in the remaining 50%. Amongst that, the circumstantial things or the life circumstances only determine 10% of our happiness, because there is something called as a hedonic adaptation, meaning that whatever happy things or whatever sad things happen in our life, we tide over that crisis after a month or so and we go to our baseline set point. The 40% of our happiness comes from intentional things. For example, meditation or exercise. We can do our lifestyle changes like practicing gratitude or kindness so that we can become more happy. So this is a slide from one of the famous books as well as the National Geographic series of Blue Zones of Longevity. And these are the females in this picture. They are having their moai. Moai meaning a kitty party in Japanese. And if you see, the average age of these females is 97 years, and they are meeting regularly at certain time of day for last 90 years. And this kitty party is not only making them happy but it is making them more satisfied and having a more security in their life, and it is essential for all these centenarians to have a long life. Now, this is one more National Geographic serial. This was called as How to Live Forever, and this Dr. Ellsworth Warham, he was 97 years of age at this time. He was a cardiac surgeon from California, and he was still operating on patients, not as a primary operator, but as a secondary operator or an assistant, and he was doing or participating 20 cardiac surgeries a month. He lived for 104 years. So this purpose of life is very important. It is very essential for life work balance. If you see in this picture, on the left side, there is a picture of a workaholic person. It is a compulsory behavior. And if you see, he is sitting on a chair which is having an attached commode. So he is not knowing what is important in his life. On the other spectrum of life, lot of people come to us for a premature retirement. They state that they are having some kind of a heart disease and they want a premature retirement. So we have to have a life work balance, so that we have to have a partial retirement and we have to have a purpose of our life, so that it can increase the quantity as well as quality of our life. Now I will quote this last study. It was the world's longest longitudinal study. This was the Harvard study of adult development, and on this study more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers are published and more than 11 books are published. In this study there were 268 Harvard undergraduates and comparative group from Boston inner city boys, and it all comprised of 724 men, and they are followed till date for more than 85 years, and they were followed with all kinds of things, like their medical examination was done every 2 yearly, all kinds of statistics was compiled, their mental studies were done, their social progress was documented and it was listed. And what they found, at the end of 50 years, what attributes the person was having, so that he can be living at 80 years of age and having a good life. So they defined the life in two ways. The physical health, they determined by a person being healthy versus person being sick, and the mental attributes, a person being happy versus person being a sad person. So they divided the people into happy well versus sad sick, and what they found was a single negative predictor, that was a loneliness or a social isolation. And they like having a comparison that it was equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this was a negative attribute. And when they thought about the positive attributes, in univariate analysis they found there were 4 things which were related to behaviors, like regular exercise, healthy weight, absence of vices like absence of smoking and absence of alcoholism, along with 2 coping abilities. The coping ability was the first one, where if somebody is having a bypass surgery, then how they were coping this kind of a stress in their further life. Secondly, the growth mindset, like if somebody is 50 years of age and he has to learn skill, something like learning a computer or learning a smartphone, that skills, they matter for their longevity. And the last one was social relations. A good amount of social relations and stable marriages, they comprise the last 2 things. However, the scientists were not stopped at doing this univariate analysis. They had a multivariate analysis, meaning what was the strongest risk factor for becoming happy well at the age of 80 years. And they found that the single attribute was a stable relationship along with the stable marriage. So why this is important? So this is the 4th longevity determinant, and that is the happiness. There are 7 chemicals which are secreted in the brain that are called as a pleasure neurotransmitters. For example, if somebody eats a good food, a dish which is of his liking, then they will be secreting dopamine in their brain. If somebody is doing a good amount of exercise, they will be releasing endorphins. Though these are called as endogenous morphines, and they will have a euphoria effect and they will feel you better. Now, if somebody is doing a good meditation, the endocannabinoids will be secreted and they will make you happy. However, oxytocin is considered as a master of this happy gang orchestra, and that it not only brings the happiness, but in addition, it will bring you a satisfaction as well as the security, and it will help you to prolong your survival. So, coming to a conclusion, we can just have a 3 simple conclusion. Eat naturally, don't eat any processed food. Move naturally, try to avoid all the conveniences like lifts and vehicles during your commutation. And lastly, you bond naturally. You have a very social relationship that are very healthy and good, and that will increase your survival. Thank you very much for your kind attention.